Jerry, you're free to start.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's 2:30, and it's time for us to begin the December meeting of the Rehoboth Beach Board of Adjustment. This meeting is being conducted virtually by order of the City Commissioners. This afternoon, the Board of Adjustment has two cases on the calendar. One case is a request for an area variance to allow for the placement of the Dolly's sign on the western exterior wall of the Rehoboth Beach History Museum. The other case is a variance request for a retaining wall at 80 Oak Avenue. We had a hearing on that case back in October. As that hearing drew to a conclusion, the applicant asked for a continuance prior to us beginning our deliberations. The continuance was granted. I asked that the case be placed on today's calendar. On December 22nd, 2021, the applicant's attorney notified the board that he is unavailable for the hearing today and asked for another continuance. Because the request is so fresh, we will have to vote on that request for a continuance. All right, so we do have some people, I believe, from the public who are here to discuss some of these cases. If any of you have requested time to speak, we ask that you address only the issues before the board. Everyone who chooses to speak during the hearing will be required to give their testimony under oath. I'm going to ask our attorney, Mr. Townsend, to administer those oaths. We don't have a court reporter today, so if a transcript of the hearing is required, the court reporter will have to work from the tape recordings of this meeting, so please keep your voices up and no cross conversations during the hearings. So let's have the roll call. At this stage, I can see that it looks like the entire board is present. I'm here, of course, and then Barry Brandt.
Present.
Jan Conacy, he's here. Walt Cassell.
Present.
And Randy Mason.
Present.
So we have a full contingent of the board here today. Madam Clerk, can you hear me?
I'm here.
Nice to hear your voice. Can you fill us in on the verification of the meeting and public notice requirements, please?
Currently, I'm out of state, so I do not have my file with me, but I can attest that the agenda and the public notice was published timely.
Okay.
The signage was placed on the property and
I'll try.
it was sent to property owners.
All right. Well, based on those assertions, I believe we can safely go forward. Ann, I want to thank you for being present today. I understand that this is your vacation, but we do appreciate your assistance, and frankly, we couldn't do it without you, so we really need you to be here. Thanks again. All right, the next order of business was to be approval of minutes, but we don't have any minutes.
I have to plug this in when I start talking.
What was that?
It looked like it was Mr. Mann, but he's now muted himself.
I didn't hear any of
So
it.
you can go ahead.
Okay. So the next matter is the old business. The old business that we need to address today is the request for a variance for 80 Oak Avenue. Now, I did get a letter from the attorney, Mr. Forston, advising that he was unable to be here today. I made the request to have this meeting put on the agenda. I believe I made that request on December 7th or 8th. And we received a letter from him last week advising that he was not available to be present today. So because the request came in within 15 days of the hearing, we have to vote on that. Is there a motion in favor of granting another continuance in this matter? Jan Conacy, is that you didn't say anything?
You're muted, Ms. Conacy.
Sorry, so moved.
Okay, is there a second to continue this matter? Okay.
I'll second that.
Who seconded that?
Mr. Brand.
Barry.
Barry? Okay. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand and saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, looks like it's a unanimous vote to continue that matter. But we like it on the calendar for next month. Okay, that means we can move to the request for the variance for the dolly sign. So the dolly sign, as I understand it, I think we all agree, is an area variance. There are 4 considerations on the law which we have to consider. The first one is the nature of the zone where the property lies, the character and use of the immediate vicinity, whether removal of the restriction on the applicant's property would seriously affect the neighboring properties and their uses, and 4, whether failure to remove the restriction would create an exceptional practical difficulty for the applicant in relation to his efforts to make normal improvements to the property. So those are the standards that we have here today. The building inspector has prepared a report. Is the building inspector available to discuss this matter?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay, Matt Janis is here. Thank you for being here. Would you please explain the position of Barry? You
Barry?
have something to say?
Yeah, before Matt, and I do apologize, Matt, for stepping in. Jerry, I need to recuse myself from this item because I am on the board of directors of the Historical Society, so I need to recuse myself.
So I think the way to do it then is to have you remove to get off to the broadcast, okay?
I am fine with that. Thank you, everyone.
He is permitted to listen. I mean, the city has been, in cases of recusal, they've been muting themselves and turning off their video, but they're allowed to stay on for purposes of listening to the proceeding.
So feel free to listen in.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Brand, if you would just turn your video off, then you'll be fine to listen in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so where were we? Matt Janis was about to give us his report. Take it away.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. I hope everybody had a happy holiday and look forward to a bright and more prosperous 22, hopefully. Before you is case number 1121-08. The location is 511 Rehoboth Avenue. The applicant today is J. David Mann III, president of the Rehoboth Beach Museum. The Rehoboth Beach Museum, of course, is located at 511 Rehoboth Avenue here in Rehoboth Beach. And the owner of the property is the city of Rehoboth Beach at 229 Rehoboth Avenue, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. The applicant, J. David Mann III, president of the Rehoboth Beach Museum, is seeking variances to the following: 270-66 regulations applicable in commercial districts for signs. C2 states each side, front, and back of a commercial property with frontage on a commercial street and with an entrance shall be permitted up to 3 square feet of sign area for each foot of building frontage that faces the commercial street. All other building sides with an entrance may have up to 2 square feet of sign area for each foot of building frontage on the lot. However, no sign in a commercial district shall exceed 100 square feet on a side. E1 states wall signs. Wall signs shall be lower than 25 feet and may not extend beyond the limits of the wall. Wall signs shall not exceed 4 inches in thickness. Individually lighted letters, logos, and design elements may extend up to 12 inches from a wall sign. The applicant seeks these variances to allow the placement of the dolly sign that was removed from its original location at 1 Rehoboth Avenue, the former site of Dolly's Candyland. The sign is to be placed on an exterior wall located at 511 Rehoboth Avenue, known as the Rehoboth Beach Museum. The property is located at 511 Rehoboth Avenue and is operated as the Rehoboth Beach Museum. The location is known as parcel identification number 334-13.20-171.00. The lot measures approximately 10,211 square feet and is situated in the C1 Central Commercial Zoning District. The building total square footage is approximately 5,400 square feet. Background information: the sign originated with the building in 1962. The original Dolly's building was mostly destroyed during the Ash Wednesday storm of the same year. The building and sign were constructed under a valid building permit issued May 22, 1962. In 2002, the sign was repaired due to deterioration of structural members from saltwater degradation. The original Dolly's property has changed hands in 2021 and has necessitated the removal of the sign. The museum wishes to place the sign on the west side of the building facing the canal dock. The placement will be approximately 12'6" high on the westerly facing facade, as shown in the support documentation submitted by the applicant. My conclusion is typically a sign is meant to inform or promote. In this instance, the sign is being placed in the museum as a timepiece because of its historic nature. The code does not speak to this exact situation, so the decision rests solely on the Board of Adjustment. As in most cases, if this variance is granted, it will not set precedent throughout the city, and any similar cases will need to come before the board for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Who's going to make the presentation for the applicant?
I would like to, if that's at all possible.
And who's speaking?
This is David Mann, the president of the museum.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Mann. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to ask our counsel to swear you.
Mr. Mann, do you affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
You may proceed.
Thank you.
Now, do you know that we can't see you in the room here? I don't know whether you have a camera on your device.
I just opened it up there. Hold on. Oh, the host has stopped it. It's telling me. Start my video. There we go.
There you go.
Hi there.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you all. Thank you. We find ourselves in a position of trying to preserve something that's become iconic and legendary within not only the city of Rehoboth Beach, but also the region and unsurprisingly on a national level. We want to do everything we can to keep that sign from becoming part of forgotten history. The landscape of the boardwalk is changing. The buildings are changing. The structures are changing. Shops are going away and hotels are going in. That sign has been on the boardwalk for not quite 60 years. And we feel as though it's extremely worthy of being preserved in a place of justification on the side of our building. We went through a lot of due diligence, looking at our roof, looking at the different sides of our building, looking at the one inside wall that had potential. And once we got the as-built dimensions, which are slightly different than what Matt said a little bit ago, it's 15 feet tall by 30 feet wide. It seems like the dimensions vary with where you start at the bottom. Are you on the D? Are you on the tail? Do you go to the top of the L, et cetera? So we've got a very large piece of signage that won't fit inside the building and would be unable to become part of our sign gallery, where we have over a dozen signs right now on the second floor gallery and in the atrium. So we have chosen to proceed according to procedure, as I've said in the past, by the book, and do everything as correctly as we possibly can to make sure that that sign does not leave the city. Nancy Alexander, the director, who's there in front of you, Jerry, got after this when it first became known literally a year ago. And we've been working with Tom Eibach ever since. We got involved with U.S. Roofing Company to inspect our roof and do a site survey as to the structure of our roof. We got involved with Lynn Rogers of Rogers Sign Company to do both an internal and external evaluation of our roof. We had multiple board meetings, and the final board meeting, we concluded that we would love to accept this sign on behalf of the Historical Society if it can be safe and feasible. So I've given you one illustration. I've got several more to go with it, just to show you the thought process and the process of elimination we went through. But we don't want it to go away. We want it to stay. It's part of the emotion that I've learned about in Rehoboth over my past 28 years down there, that people become attached to their ocean. They become attached to their beach. They become attached to their sign. It's my beach. It's my boardwalk. It's my sign. And this is millions of people. It's been amazing to me to see how much emotion goes along with that sign. When people see that sign, it tells them they're in their happy place. They're now where they want to be. They've run the gauntlet of Route 1. They found a parking space on the Avenue or Baltimore or Wilmington. And now they're down at the 50-yard line and they get to go where they want to go. So we'd like to keep it as a welcoming sign of the city of Rehoboth Beach. We position it in such a way that it will not be a distraction to motorists, but it will provide a photo op location for multiple settings. You can be on the patio next to the museum. You can be on the switchback walkway down to the canal dock. You can be on the bridge overlooking the canal. It gives you plenty of places to take photographs and keep it in your memories. And hopefully for us, we've got 30 generations with that sign. We'd like to keep it for another 30. And that's pretty much where we are. And Nancy can provide any further detail. She's there in front of you. I'm nursing a little bit of a sore throat right now.
Well, I'm glad you're there. I hope that you get better quickly. All right, Nancy, do you want to do you have any comments you'd like to present to the board? Yes, please.
Your members may want to ask questions of.
Before I do anything else, I just want to thank Tom Ibach. I want to thank Roger Sines, and I want to thank.
You're going to have to slow down
Sure.
and speak clearly because I'm having a little hard time.
Okay, I've
Okay,
got my mask.
we're going to start with a name and address, and then I am going to ask you, because of your mask, to be really close to that microphone.
Sure.
I hope you're not uncomfortable.
Fine.
Anything, Glenn, from you?
I just want to be sure that they're picking her up in IT.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Nancy Alexander. I'm the director of the Rehoboth Beach Museum, and that museum is located at 511 Rehoboth Avenue.
Okay.
I'm
And ma'am, do you affirm that your testimony in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
It will, yes.
Okay. And I guess we'll ask for our IT to speak up if they're not picking up Miss Alexander. Well,
She sounds fine.
all right, good.
I want to add that the museum, the Historical Society, would very much like to thank Tom Ibach and thank Roger Sines and thank the city for its assistance. I have lived here for a number of years, and in discussing this with a number of people, one thing that a very wise person said to me was that the sign is more than candy, it's about memories. And the museum is in the business of preserving artifacts and the memories that they represent.
Okay, that's what you'd like to say? All right. Are there any questions for either Ms. Alexander or for Mr. Mann from any of the board members? Nobody has any questions so far. I do have a couple of questions.
Gary, I have one.
Okay, Walt, well,
Yeah, so we got in our package, we got a picture of the sign facing the, as you come on the road, come into town, or I guess that would be the west side. And then we got some other ones showing the south side and the east side. Are they four options that are being presented to us?
Those are the options that we discussed when Mayor Stan Mills and Lynn Rogers and I were looking at possibilities once the roof had been deemed unsafe and unfeasible. And unfeasible meaning prohibitively expensive. It would have doubled the cost of the relocation, and it would have put it in an extremely inappropriate location. What I found when I was working on this is that there are some of us that are, I'll use the term dimensionally challenged. And I would talk about the sign being, as we know now, from the as-built when it came down on the 15th, it's 15 by 30. So why can't it go here? Well, that wall measures 17 feet. So it's 30 feet wide, it won't fit, but why can't it go there? So I've done a little bit of homework and thankful to Brenneman at Roger Sign for doing those illustrations. It won't fit on the front. It overlaps brick and framing. It won't fit on the south side. It overlaps framing and/or it overlaps brick. And as Matt said earlier, it can't extend outside the borders of the building. We're extremely fortunate that that western facade measures 35 feet wide. it lets us place it pretty low compared to the height of the roof, which dramatically reduces our issues with dealing with dynamic load, because the wind was taken into account on the boardwalk, and that was designed to withstand 150-mile-per-hour winds. And the structure that supported that weighed over 3,000 pounds. So now we're fortunate to put it on the western side, which is a relatively calm area, keep it almost virtually below the roof line, have it fit without blocking anything on the building, not interfering with the downspouts, not interfering with the windows. So I sent those along to you just to show you what it would look like. Because again, I had trouble with math in a few cases. So it just seemed a lot easier to show people how big it was, how big it is.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple of questions. Let me ask the building inspector the first question. How much higher than the roof is this sign going to extend? Matt, can you answer that question?
No documentation was presented to me to show exactly exact measurements. I do have pictures, but so it almost, if we look at the one picture submitted for the west side, it does look like the L is just going to be barely at the pinnacle of that turret type structure to the southwest corner of the building.
I have one that's a little more updated, and I apologize because I got these after I left Rehoboth on the 15th. So I'm a little bit behind, but I did send them to all of you as part of the packet. And I believe I can share the more recent one with you if that would help.
Sure, let's take a look at it.
Let's take a whirl here. Okay, so this is an updated rendering.
There we go.
So this gives, and it doesn't really show the HVAC. Part of what I liked about the slight extension above the roof line is that it does block the second floor HVAC, which is fairly noticeable depending on your elevation. And I think this can be probably moved a little bit left as you're looking at it, and probably a little bit lower. But if we look at from what I call the tail, where the words are saltwater taffy, if you look from the tip of the tail to the top of the taller L, that dimension in total is 15 feet. So we can approximate from that, and I can certainly get more further detail once if we need to go a little bit further with this, if that would be helpful. But I think this should give you a pretty good idea that there's not that much exposure. And what it does do is actually hide some things that are less pleasant to look at.
Okay. So I have another question now. I think I heard you say, or Miss Alexander say, that there's an exhibit in the museum that contains perhaps 1,000 or more signs. Is that true? Is that
No.
right?
If we get into postcards, the number is 1,000. If we get into signage, it's in the dozens.
Okay, so you have dozens of signs displayed in the museum, is that correct?
Yes, we have what we're calling our sign gallery, which is intended to be, Nancy can clarify this, my terminology may be incorrect, but I call it a permanent / revolving sign exhibit, because we are limited to square footage. But the atrium, the tower that you see on the right of this picture, that's got signs that are covering and or will be covering the inside walls. And then the south wall of the gallery has also been dedicated to signage. A lot of this stemmed from the research that we did about how attached the American public has become to signs. And I knew about the Neon Museum in Las Vegas. I learned that there are 9 more nationally and 2 more in Canada. So in North America, there are a total of 11 museums that are dedicated strictly to signage. And these museums have a fairly large following, The closest one to us is in Philadelphia. And then we've got one to the south in Charlotte, North Carolina. The largest one is the American Sign Museum in Cincinnati, Ohio. So we've tried to slowly expand our offerings. The second floor was a $750,000 project. And slowly but surely, we've outfitted the Papa John Lecture Hall. And right now in the gallery, we're showing the Delaware Beach Life photo contest winners. That space will be revolving, but the sign gallery will be permanent. The signs within the display may change. It'll just be different signs.
What is the most prominent size-wise sign that you have displayed inside at this time, if you know?
Nancy can correct me, but I want to say either 6 feet or 8 feet.
Okay. Can you tell me what sign that would be?
That is the blue dolly sign that was on the brick facade that was at the window level at the boardwalk. And Tom gave us that almost a year ago. We had it restored locally. And that's up in the atrium, kind of just below the windows that are peeking out there on the right of the slide.
Okay, thank you. Who owns the building?
The city of Rehoboth Beach.
And so the museum is a lessee, in other words.
That is correct.
Now, is there a question or an issue of whether the owner of the property has granted permission for you to fix this onto the side of the building?
There is not at all. Mayor Stan Mills was actively involved in this project almost from the beginning. When Tom got to the point that the deadline was on the horizon, he talked to Stan Mills about possibly donating it to the city. And Mayor Mills and I had extensive conversations and repeated visits to the roof of the museum and repeated circuits around the outside of the museum to look at all the options and discuss the pathway to preserve the sign. It was presented at one point that there was the potential that we would not need to appear before you all. But we ultimately concluded that, as I said earlier, we wanted to be correct in this. We wanted to be by the book and do everything within the system, because the city is the beneficial owner of our building. We don't have any control over the land around the building. We leased the building. We had control of 0.43 acres along the canal embankment, and that lease with USACE was terminated August 20th. So the building is our world, and everything outside belongs to the city.
Can I supplement that answer, Mr. Chair? This is Glenn with the city. So the mayor did bring this to the Board of Commissioners at a couple commissioners meetings. I've reviewed the lease document. The lease document does not prohibit this sign from being affixed to the building. So the commissioners have taken the position that they're under a lease agreement. They're allowed to do this if they would prefer to go that direction, being the Historical Society. So the commissioners are fully aware and just taken the position that this is the Historical Society's decision.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Because I think that's it for my questions. Are there any board members that have any questions at this point? Is there anyone in the public who would like to address this case? Hearing none, I can advise the board members and the people listening here today that we did receive one piece of correspondence that I'm aware of in opposition to this. If you hold on a second, I'll find that. Here it is. It's a letter from Jeffrey Good, 1 Grove Street, which I believe is about on the other side of the park. And his letter states as follows. I am writing to voice my opinion to a variance to allow the dolly sign to be installed at the Rehoboth Beach Museum. My main objection is that I do not believe that a public institution such as Rehoboth Beach Museum should be in the business of promoting a private business. Dolly's is still an ongoing business. The Rehoboth Beach Museum is not supported by the city to be promoting a specific business. There are indeed other businesses that compete with Dolly's, and government-supported institutions should not be advertising for any particular business. Further objection is that Grove Park, where the museum is located, should be as natural a park as we can make it. Having a huge sign promoting candy is not in keeping with the beautiful park oasis for people to enjoy nature. Why should the museum be promoting an unhealthy candy? Lastly, having a Dolly sign on the museum building will cause confusion for tourists unfamiliar with Rehoboth Beach. Tourists will think that taffy is sold in the museum. Sincerely, Jeffrey Good. So as far as I know, that's the only correspondence we've received for or against this case. That particular letter is against your variance request. If there are no other questions or no other comments from the public, Fred, do you have something to say?
I do whenever you're ready.
So I think we're ready.
Okay, so I have a question, I think, from Mr. Janis. Is it the case that the sign needs a variance for two reasons? One, because of its size, which the record indicates is 15 by 30, and secondly, because of its elevation, that it exceeds the top line of the building?
That is correct.
Okay, so I guess for Mr. Mann, the sign is the sign. This is not a recreation of the Dolly's sign, right?
We are working with sign number 2. The original sign was placed in service in the spring of 1962 when the building was hastily constructed after the storm. That sign stayed in place until it suffered store damage. The letter D was gone for a little while. It became Ollie's for a short period of time. And the current sign was put in service in 2002. So we're not quite to the extent that we are with the lighthouse and the traffic circle, where we're on replica number 3. It's replica number 1, but it's an exact replica in terms of the size and the shape, because they wanted to retain the structure which had been engineered into the roof subsurface and was underneath all the membrane to ensure that there would be no water leakage and no potential leverage which would pry it up off the roof.
Thank you. So the other matter for us, if we were to entertain a motion to approve the variance, would relate to the elevation of the sign, I take it. And the last image I saw suggested that the O was perhaps not any higher than the wall. Would that be some way to give reference to an approval? It seems to me that it's not your intent to locate the sign any higher than necessary because you're worried about load. Is there some way that we could reference the elevation of the sign such that an approval would restrict the installation of the sign to a certain place and no higher?
I think we'd have no trouble agreeing to that. I've spent a little bit of time looking at it since I got this literally on Friday afternoon. And again, thanks to Deb at Rogers Sign Company. I think there's a little bit of room here, a little bit of wiggle room. And one of the things that we learned from the first renderings that were done in the Cape Gazette, when the sign was placed on the roof, is that the higher the sign goes, the more that it tends to loom over the building and take it out of balance. So I'm trying to keep aesthetics in mind here and take what's been a remarkably plain building for as long as I've known it, until we got the Rehoboth Beach Museum sign over the back door earlier this year. There was really nothing on that side of the building to identify who we were or what we did. And so I'm looking at it and I'm thinking that there's probably a foot or two to play with here, but I would have no trouble agreeing to a maximum height limit.
Well, would you be willing to agree that the letter O doesn't reach above the roof of the building?
Right now, the O is not above the roof line.
Yeah.
A little bit of the E, the L's, the E, and the S all have some protrusion. And just looking at it, I can't think that that number is more than 5 feet. It's probably closer to 3.
But I think what council has been asking you, it would make it kind of easy to put this in motion form if you said that you agree that the sign should be placed such as so that the O will not extend beyond the roof line. Could you live with that?
I wish I had my associate Lynn Rogers on this. The O, I would say with 99.9% certainty, would not go above the roof line.
All right.
I can offer.
That sign could move 6 inches to the left and 6 inches down quite easily.
Mr. Chair, the only thing I see perhaps to help with limiting the location or describing the location is that the issue would be that the tail would perhaps cover one of the windows depending on how low it is. So I would say that the O extends no higher than the roof line, such to allow that the tail not cover any of the windows.
Thank you.
That works.
That's extremely helpful because that staircase right now is also plain, but it will become part of our gallery work, more in the line of artwork than signage. As I mentioned earlier, we have over 1,000 postcards in our collection. We have a lot of art in there. So we've got a very plain staircase, which thankfully more people prefer to take than the elevator. So on the horizon, we will be doing some work in there, and I would really hate to block any portion of any of the 3 windows.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from anybody, any of the board members? Jan Conacy. You have to unmute, Jan.
Every time I unmute, I get muted again. Am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
Okay, my question is, my understanding, we also need a variance because typically a sign, I think our code even points out that a sign belongs on the build, like a dolly sign belongs in the place that's selling saltwater taffy. French fries belong on French fries. And I believe our code points out that we would need a variance from that portion of our code that says the sign must reflect the advertising of the building. Is that correct, Matt? Matt?
It typically signs are put on the buildings to promote the services that are offered by that building. Yes.
So that when we do the variance, we need to note that also. That's all I wanted to point out.
Why don't you take that? Fred's going to be able to address that.
So I think the concept you're referring to is an on-premises versus an off-premises sign.
Yes.
However, this is this particular use of this sign is really on premises. Because it's said to be an iconic object. So it's on a museum as opposed to being at a store that sells candy.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we do it right. That's all.
I appreciate the question. I don't know if this discussion helps Matt decide whether we need to address anything else in the course of approving this. If the motion were to be approved, that we want to make sure, as does Ms. Conacy, that we grant whatever variances are necessary to locate this sign.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend, and I am currently reviewing our codes right now just to be sure.
Okay, well, we can continue the discussion. I wanted to throw this out for the board members to consider as we get to the point where we're going to have to vote on this. I took a look at the 2010 Comprehensive Development Plan, and I found two sections that I think are pertinent to the case we have before us today. On page 88 of the Comprehensive Development Plan, it states, quote, "A basic commercial land use consideration is that the retention of historical landmark structures is of great value to the city, and encouragement will be given to the owners of older structures to retain a sense of history in their downtown structures." That's one. And the other one I found on page 92 that says, "A regulatory concern is how to protect the more distinctive and unusual parts of commercial Rehoboth, such as Funland and the Dolly sign and other landmark businesses. We must protect our commercial icons from unintentional adverse impacts from the zoning regulations themselves." Now, to me, it's pretty clear that the people who drafted the Comprehensive Development Plan and the council, the commissioners who adopted it, looked at the Dolly sign as a landmark here in town. So it's been recognized as such. And I would point out one other thing. When I was walking into the building today, I noticed the mural on the side of this building, the parking, that faces the parking lot. And that mural contains a drawing of a painting of the Dolly sign over the boardwalk. So it would appear to me that our city fathers have recognized that the Dolly sign does have a landmark recognition. That's what I'm taking from all this. Jan, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, as one of the people who was on the Planning Commission and very involved in the 2010 plan, part of the follow-up we did was we met with Tom Ibach and the owners and the State Division of Historical Preservation. And as a follow-up several years ago, me and Jim Ellison and another person met with the woman who represents the Division of Historical Preservation about getting historical preservation status, whatever it's called, for both Dolly's and the Dolly sign and Funland. And we met in December and started moving forward with it. And then COVID happened in March, and everything got put to the side. But at the time of the meeting, when I talked to Tom Ibach, he had grave concerns about what was going to happen with the building when the lease was up. So we kept that in mind. So that's, so you're right, Jerry. It was very important in the comprehensive plan. And when some of us said, let's start taking some of these actions that had never been completed and do something with it, those were the first two things we did.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other comments or questions as we consider this case before us today? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I think this brings us to the point where we're ready to vote on this. Does somebody want to make a motion? Come on, folks.
Okay, I might not get it right, so Fred, you might have to help me here. I move that we grant a variance to the Rehoboth Rehoboth Beach Historical Museum to place the Dolly's, the iconic Dolly sign on the west side of their building, with the O not going above the roof line and the tail not blocking any of the three windows. It would be a hardship to do otherwise.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Fred, you have some comments?
So I think Mr. Mandalis had made a point which was that the elevation of the sign need be no lower than would obscure the windows there, so that in theory anyway, the O could be just high enough or just just above the roof line, if that was what was necessary to keep the tail from blocking any of the windows. I think that was the point that was being made. That was allowing a little bit of tolerance there for the O to exceed the roof line.
Well, I would accept that as an amendment.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so with that motion and second, we're prepared to, Walt, we're
Oh,
prepared.
I second it,
All
yep.
right. So we're prepared to vote on it. I'm going to ask each of you to cast your vote and explain why you voted as you did. And we'll start today with Randy Mason.
Well, I vote to approve this variance. And I do think that the nature of the sign fits the community and fits that neighborhood and fits the building. And I don't think that it presents a problem or an issue to any of the neighbors. And I think that it will actually be a great addition for the city. So I vote for it.
Okay. Walt, your turn.
Sure, Jerry. You know, the Dolly sign has been the backdrop of generations of family photos for over half a century. And it's an iconic symbol of Rehoboth Beach. Jerry, I'm glad you mentioned the CDP encourages the preservation and unique character and charm of our town. So I was glad to see what the museum presented. I don't see where allowing the variance would change the nature of the zone. I don't see by granting this variance would impact the character of the district, and I don't see where allowing the variance would affect any neighboring properties or uses.
Jan?
I'll agree with Walt.
Okay.
Do I need to go further than that, Jerry? I'm not sure.
That's fine. And then
Thank you.
finally, I'm going to vote in favor of the application. It's clear to me that many people in this town at the present time and in the last 20, 30 years have considered this sign to be a big part of the character of our community. It has achieved landmark status. And for that reason, this seems to be the only place that we can find in the city to put it up and to maintain it. And I think it looks kind of neat on the side of the building. And I don't think it's going to adversely affect any of the surrounding properties. And it's going to maintain part of the charm that we've been trying to keep here in Rehoboth Beach. So I vote for it. The motion carries unanimously 4-0. So to the museum members, board members, congratulations. We look forward to seeing it on the side of the building and keeping in good shape, okay? Thank you. All right. What else?
Thank you all. And we're going to do our best to preserve it as it came off the building. We have a little patina in mind and try not to restore it so it stays looking old. So it will have more of a matte finish than the illustration you saw. And I forgot to mention that we have no plans for additional lighting. We'd like to be part of reducing light pollution in Rehoboth, not adding to it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we move on to our next order of business, and that is election of officers. So does anybody have a motion to make in regards to a slate of officers for the next year?
I have a question, Jerry.
Go ahead, Jan.
How many officers does the Board of Adjustment have, other than the chair?
Chair, vice chair, and secretary.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, I would nominate Barry Brandt as vice chair.
Okay. How about chair?
I'll nominate Jerry Capone for chair.
Thank you, Randy.
Oh, I thought the mayor appointed the chair. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you better be sorry.
Doesn't the mayor appoint the chair?
No, the board appoints the chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's not been in the history, I don't
Okay.
think.
And who's
Okay.
who's our Walt is our secretary. Anybody want to nominate Walt?
I'll nominate Walter for secretary.
Okay, so that's the slate. It would be me as the chair, Barry as vice chair, and Walt as secretary. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody. We've just elected officers for the next year. And I think we're at the point where we can adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn? Somebody.
Move we adjourn.
Second, Randy, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a safe New Year, please, and stay well. And we look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Okay, but
Thanks, Jerry.